The cool sea breeze gently flowed through the open window of my modest coastal home, mixing with the faint scent of antiseptics that clung to my nurse's uniform. It was just past midnight, and the town of Seabrook was asleep, its secrets tucked away like its residents, under their blankets. I, Emily Thornton, was finishing my nightly ritual of unwinding after a long shift at the local hospital, my mind still echoing with the day's events. As I sat down with my laptop, intending to lose myself in some mindless internet browsing, an email notification popped up, immediately drawing my attention. The sender was anonymous, and the subject line read, "The truth about Seabrook." A sense of unease washed over me as I hesitated before clicking it open. The email contained a single link. No text, no explanation. Curiosity, coupled with a tinge of apprehension, nudged me to click on it. The link redirected me to a DarkWeb site named The Undercurrent. It was a stark, eerie page, filled with a long list of names, each followed by a hidden secret. To my horror, I found my name listed there. The secret beside it was a past incident, a memory I had desperately tried to bury deep within me. My heart raced, my rare eidetic memory vividly recalling the incident as if it were happening all over again. I heard a creak from the hallway, snapping me back to the present. It was just the old floorboards settling, but it underscored how vulnerable I felt. I looked back at the screen, my eyes scanning through other names and secrets, recognizing my neighbors, friends, even colleagues. Who was behind this? What did they want? As a nurse, I was no stranger to keeping others' secrets, but this was different. This was invasive, malicious. My mind raced, trying to piece together who could have access to such information. The site's user, EchoMaker, remained a mystery, their identity shrouded as much as their intentions. Dawn was breaking, casting a soft glow into my living room. I hadn't realized I'd spent the entire night on that site, diving into the depths of the undercurrent. But one thing was clear. I needed to find out who EchoMaker was. I had to stop them before more secrets spilled out, tearing our small town apart. I closed my laptop, the screen's light extinguishing, leaving me in the dim morning light. Today, Seabrook would wake up to its true face, and I couldn't let it drown in the undercurrent of its own dark secrets. The narrow, cobblestone streets of Seabrook had never felt so foreboding. In the light of day, the quaint coastal town seemed untouched. But beneath the surface, the revelations from the undercurrent cast long shadows over every familiar face I encountered. As I walked to the local cafe, the weight of secrets pressed heavily on me. Rough night Emily, Sarah, the cafe owner and an old friend, approached with a concerned look. Her name, too, was on that list. "Something like that," I replied, forcing a smile. The conversation shifted to town gossip, but my mind was elsewhere. EchoMaker. Who could it be? A stranger? Or someone hiding in plain sight? After leaving the cafe, I decided to visit Mr. Jenkins, the town's librarian. If anyone knew residents' histories, it was him. The library was a sanctuary of knowledge, its walls lined with books that held stories of their own. Mr. Jenkins, a frail man with a sharp mind, greeted me with his usual warmth. "Emily, what can I help you with today?" he asked, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I need to know about someone in town, someone who might have access to a lot of personal information," I said hesitantly. Mr. Jenkins studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "This wouldn't have anything to do with those rumors swirling around, would it?" I nodded, realizing the rumors had already begun their insidious spread. We talked at length, Mr. Jenkins providing insights into various townsfolk. Yet none seemed to fit the profile of EchoMaker. As I left the library, a small detail Mr. Jenkins mentioned caught my attention. The local recluse, Mr. Harrow. A man of mystery, living on the outskirts of town, rarely seen but often spoken about in hushed tones. Could he be EchoMaker? The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over Seabrook. The day had brought more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. I needed to find out more about Mr. Harrow. With every step I took towards unraveling this mystery, the deeper I seemed to sink into Seabrook's shadowy depths. The sky was a canvas of deep purples and reds as I made my way towards the outskirts of Seabrook. The whispers about Mr. Harrow, the local recluse, echoed in my mind. Each step a movement towards an unknown danger. His house, a dilapidated structure shadowed by overgrown trees, stood as a silent sentinel at the edge of the woods. I hesitated at the gate, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the culmination of all my fears and suspicions. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the gate open, its creak echoing ominously through the still evening air. Mr. Harrow was waiting for me, sitting calmly on his porch, as if he had anticipated my arrival. His appearance was unassuming, yet his eyes held a depth of knowledge that was unsettling. "Emily Thornton, the nurse with a memory like a steel trap," he greeted, his voice eerily calm. "I wondered when you'd come." "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why expose the town's secrets? Why mine?" Mr. Harrow stood up, walking towards me. "Control, Emily. People are easy to manipulate when you know their deepest fears and regrets. You, of all people, should understand the power of memories." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. He was EchoMaker, using the DarkWeb to puppeteer the town. Anger and fear warred within me, but I needed to stay focused. I had to stop him. "You can't control people's lives. These secrets, they're destroying Seabrook," I argued, my voice steadier now. "Destroying? No. I'm just removing the masks. We all hide behind facades, don't we?" His tone was almost philosophical, detached from the chaos he'd created. I realized then that arguing was futile. Mr. Harrow was too far gone in his delusions of grandeur. I needed to escape, to bring this information to the authorities. But as I turned to leave, he moved with surprising speed, blocking my path. "You're not going anywhere, Emily. You know too much," he said, a menacing edge to his voice. The following moments were a blur of adrenaline and fear. I struggled against his grasp, the desperation to survive lending me strength. In the chaos, I managed to break free, my nurse's training kicking in as I assessed the fastest way to incapacitate him temporarily. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, the sounds of Mr. Harrow's angry shouts fading into the night. My mind raced with what I had learned, the implications for Seabrook, and the danger that still lurked. As I reached the safety of the main street, the town's lights flickering in the distance, I knew that the story was far from over. Seabrook's secrets were out, but at what cost? And what of EchoMaker? The answers remained shrouded in the DarkWeb's murky depths, leaving a chilling uncertainty hanging in the air. I stared into the mirror, tracing my scarred eyelid where flesh once met. Another life ago. But those memories remained blurred. But the sensation, the vicious scrape of metal, the wet void where an orb had been. Now, only this sight of sin remained, dark whispers flickering at the edge of vision. My purchase had arrived, stealthily boxed and left at my door under cover of night. Within sat an enigma, an artificial eye smooth as onyx, promising truths where others saw lies. I slipped it into my socket and reality shifted. Shadows peeled back like skin, revealing festering wounds kept from daylight. Down the lane, Mrs. Wilson sang hymns while beating her daughter in the cellar. Outside the diner, Mayor Taylor flirted with girls young as dawn, and father. He stood over her broken body, scarlet dripping from his upturned palms onto snow flecked with ash. I clutched my head, choking on bile. Madness, this had to be. Yet some archaic instinct knew this sight showed forbidden fruit, bitter but the sole nourishment left in a barren world. Sleep offered no respite from the eye's cursed visions. Each night, Father stalked my dreams, daggers glinting where fingers should be, his smile stretched too wide, scissoring stitches that should not part. Blood-curdling laughter echoed as he sliced open my other eye, prying loose the orb to place in his mouth. I jerked awake, dripping in sweat, clutching emptied sockets agape. Morning brought no clarity, only strangers disguised in familiar guises. I watched from boarded windows, seeing the mayor greet children with hands that had groped them, the priest counsel sins he secretly endorsed. All moved as in a play I'd seen, but now understood, their true natures writ plain across twitching visages. This town was rotten to the core, a perfect disguise for poisonous hearts. And Father, that smiling demon I had called family, was the most depraved of all. I had to know more, had to follow this thread to expose every secret festering in this festering place. The eye had unveiled nightmares, but also shown a way forward. Whatever truths lay buried, I would rip them screaming into the light, or lose myself forever, trying in the darkness. My quest for answers led to a reclusive corner of the town library, shielded by dust and shadow. Ancient archives held whispers of locals who'd seen too much. Broken souls locked away or fled under cover of dark. One name surfaced again and again, the Order of Deeper Knowledge. Rumors told of cultists who traded forbidden secrets, welcoming lost lambs to drink deep from wells of uncanny wisdom. Their inner sanctum lay somewhere ripe with rot, hidden in plain sight below some simple storefront. That night, I crouched outside the butcher shop, the eye showing flickers within that betrayed depths far deeper. Candles guttered amid rituals I dared not comprehend, and robed figures chanted tongues alien yet familiar. Their leader noticed me then, emerging into lamplight. "Come in, boy. We've been expecting you." His smile curled cold as graveworms. I knew then there was no turning back from this path. Inside, the world dissolved into nightmare. Men and women writhed naked, fused in orgiastic rites that peeled back my idea of humanity. Ghastly tomes spoke of elder gods and blasphemous gates between realms. And my father knelt before their master, receiving some unholy sacrament I could bear to glimpse no more. I fled into the night, retching up soul and stomach alike. Madness clawed at the edges of vision and thought. All I had known as truth was crumbling. Back at home, ghosts thickened. Father smiled from mantles and mirrors, daggers forever tracing my face. The eye showed him everywhere, an insidious phantom I could not escape. Days blurred into a waking dream of fear and paranoia. In the market, Father laughed among chattering shoppers, invisible to all but me. At church, he joined soulless smiles and empty prayers. The townsfolk's disguises slipped further, exposing pulsing secrets beneath wants. Kind faces. Only the cult accepted me, a lost lamb ripe for the shearing. But their embrace seemed colder than this world's rejection. Exhausted and starving, I knew I must uncover the eye's purpose before it consumed me utterly. Back to that unhallowed book I went, fumbling for the answer in the margins of forbidden pages until, at last, an origination surfaced in crabbed script too dreadful to read yet impossible to ignore. My vision swam as ancient letters, seemingly writ in blood, revealed the eye's sinister origins. Crafted by a cabal of mages to pierce veils between worlds, it had shown them elder mysteries and maddened them with knowledge no mortal should see. Seeking to end their descent, the cabal's survivors buried the eye beneath this twisting town. But some remained who knew its location, safeguarding the secret through generations. Now their heirs called themselves the Order, continuing cryptic rites and recruiting lost souls to fill their ranks. And my father, who must have discovered the eye's grave on some childhood dare, had risen through their esoteric hierarchy until becoming their conduit to forbidden powers. I had to make him answer for his crimes. For Mother. That night, a twisted ritual drew me to their unholy sanctum, where robed figures chanted in tongues that curled the senses. Their leader stood triumphant, Father at his side, grinning that cold, familiar grin. Come, boy, join our exalted circle and taste true understanding. All will be revealed. Rage and madness simmered, but I feigned weak compliance. Let me see, I begged. Deeper and deeper, they led me into blasphemous rites, orgiastic visions, burning away all that once defined me. At the circle's core, Father stood proudly by the warped altar where he had ended Mother's life, knife glinting eagerly. Come, my son. Finish what was begun, and your awakening will be complete. With a wordless howl, I lunged, fists finding forbidden flesh. Chaos erupted as robed figures surged forward, monstrous faces glimpsed in flickering candles. The eye saw all and knew what must be done. I ripped it free and crushed the orb between palms slicked scarlet. A guttural scream rent the air, and the cult's leader collapsed, their unholy conduit destroyed. Darkness swallowed me as the temple crumbled into the void it had held at bay for so long. John stared blankly at his computer screen, the lurid images flickering by in a blur. Another night, another haunting livestream searing itself into his mind. As the masked figure panned shakily down yet another nondescript street, John struggled to place where precisely this was unfolding. The neighborhood seemed so familiar, yet just out of reach. Then, in the distance, a landmark jumped out, the towering oak by the old library. John shot up in his chair, pulse pounding. This was merely blocks from his apartment. He yelled for his sister Claire, who came rushing in. It started again, and it's too close to home this time. Look. Claire gasped as she peered at the screen. It was unmistakably their corner of the city, yet the twisting camera work captured it in a hauntingly alien light. A muffled noise arose in the distance. The figure swung around clumsily to focus on a dark alleyway. A huddled shape lay curled on the ground. As the figure crept forward, drawn like a moth to the flame, the shape erupted into a man desperately scrambling backwards on elbows and heels. His panicked moans carried even through the computer's tinny speakers. The mask loomed over the helpless stranger, its expressionless face more unnerving for what it kept hidden. A thick arm shot out, gripping the man's wrist in an unbreakable hold. He was dragged helplessly out of view, his cries fading into the night. The figure lingered a moment, panning slowly across the abandoned street now heavy with a scene from a nightmare. Then, as abruptly as it began, the stream cut out, replaced by the host's ominous logo. Claire sank onto the couch, face drained of color. It's here. Who knows if that poor soul is even? John pulled up the dark corners of the web, hunting for any traces of the host or clues to their agenda. But as always, the phantom slipped through his grasp, leaving nothing behind but its sickening payload. We have to do something before it's us out there, John muttered, staring at the address on screen as if answers could be willed into existence. Their seemingly safe streets had become a theater of terrors, with an unseen director pulling the strings towards unknown ends. And each night's performance crept ever closer to home. Chapter 2. Close to Home. That night, John lay awake, haunted by the man's cries. Somewhere in the city's shadows, who knew what fate had befallen him. A soft rustling roused John. Someone was at the front door. He crept down the hall, heart pounding. But it was only Claire, eyes red, rimmed from her own fitful sleep. I checked the usual sites, she whispered. Still nothing new posted. Wherever that poor soul ended up. At least we didn't have to watch. John sighed, pulling her into a hug. But no reassurance could erase the lingering traces of fear imprinted on their streets. That evening, John and Claire tuned in warily to the usual broadcast time. Long minutes dragged by with no connection. Had last night's exploits finally satisfied the host's twisted thirst? Just as hope kindled, the stream crashed live onto their screens without warning. John's blood ran cold. It had returned, as unavoidable as a recurring nightmare, and this time it was broadcasting from directly outside their own building. Shaky footage peered down the street, panning slowly across familiar storefronts and parked cars. A lone figure trudged into view, oblivious to the sinister focus upon them. It was Mr. Wilson, their elderly neighbor shuffling home with grocery bags. Before he knew what was happening, massive hands erupted from the shadows, wrenching his cries silent. The camera swiveled wildly, settling on Mr. Wilson's contorted face, locked in a rictus of terror. His mouth worked soundlessly as the figures melded into the enveloping night, taking him to whatever unimaginable fate awaited. The image lingered as John and Claire watched in horror, stunned witnesses to violations spilling into reality from the sterile safety of screens. Their secure world was fracturing like a broken mirror, its sharp reflections slashing at senses barely clinging to comprehension. John flung himself away, retching onto the carpet. All Claire could do was clutch his heaving shoulders. Broken whispers of comfort lost to her own shock. After an eternity, John stumbled to his feet, wild-eyed. "We have to do something before it's us out there." Claire knew, with a sinking heart, he was right. But how do you fight a nameless terror seeping through the cracks of normalcy itself? That night, John dug deeper into the toxic recesses of the web. Somewhere in those labyrinthine passages, answers must lie. But with each disturbing crumb uncovered, a deeper, nameless dread took root. He found mentions of invite, only underground streams far removed from any regulations, events where anything was allowed, so long as audiences were sufficiently attentive and payments sufficiently extravagant. A notorious figure was named again and again as host of the most depraved live shows. Could this be the fiend hunting their streets under guise of entertainment? And if so, what malignant design did he harbor in snatching victims from the city's helpless bosom? John showed Claire his grim findings, hands shaking. "It's bigger than we thought, and I think it's only just beginning." Her breath caught in horror, for how does one fight a concealed evil seeping through society's very pores, twisting reality into a relentless nightmare? Chapter 3. Nowhere to Run. That night, the siblings found no rest. As they lay wakeful, a message flashed across John's screen. The broadcast had begun anew. With dread in their hearts, they tuned in to witness streets now hauntingly familiar. The camera prowled down winding back alleys, lingering on darkened doorways as if selecting its next plaything. Suddenly, movement. A lone teenager stumbled into view, headphones in, oblivious to the stalking presence. Before her muffled cries could carry far, massive hands seized her in a chokehold. She thrashed weakly as the captor dragged her out of sight, the camera panning away dispassionately. John and Claire stared, paralyzed as their city bled horrors into their very homes through screens that should keep reality at bay. Something had to be done. But how do you challenge a threat that melts back into the urban sprawl between atrocities? Clenching fists, they knew they had to follow the rivulets of fear, seeping through back alleys unseen. Quietly, they tracked the stream's path through dimly lit lanes, hunting for clues left in the wake of violence. A displaced pile of rubble, scrape marks on weathered walls, telltale traces that hinted at struggles cut mercifully from view. As they pieced together the brutal tableau, Claire grabbed John's arm. A faint noise carried on the night breeze. They froze, watching in mute horror as a hulking silhouette dragged writhing limbs into a deserted lot. The camera panned around to reveal them recoiling in shock and recognition. They had been followed, toyed with, cornered in the spider's web closing around their city. Their hearts stopped as the figure paused, cocking its head appraisingly. Before it could advance, John hurled a brick with unerring aim, cracking the camera lens in a shower of sparks. They bolted as heavy footfalls thundered in pursuit through the twisting alleys. At last, panting and spent in a secluded park, they dared to speak. The hunter had become the hunted, but their battle was just beginning. For how do you fight those whose power lies in keeping their quarry constantly off balance, twisting reality into a malign fantasies? Chapter 4: Beyond Reach. With the host's next broadcast, John and Claire knew they had to act. They tracked the stream winding through back alleys, hunting for signs of the abduction happening now. A piercing scream shattered the night, carrying even through the tinny speakers. They sprinted towards the sound, fear lending them speed. As they raced around a corner, the camera panned to reveal its prey, a young woman backed against a wall, face frozen in terror. Without thought, John tore a loose pipe from the ground and hurled it end over end at the camera. It crashed to the pavement in an explosion of glass and wire. Looking up in fear and desperation, the woman spotted John and Claire's outstretched hands. She seized them desperately, allowing herself to be pulled from that place of nightmares. Safely behind them now, she rasped how thankfully this nightmare was over. But John knew it would survive tonight only to continue elsewhere, if the host still moved free. They brought the woman to safety before returning to the shadows, following the host's shadowy trail. Pieces fell into place. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts was the focus of whispers on the dark corners of the web. Tonight, they would face this phantom and end its menace for good. The live stream flickered to life from within, unfocused camera panning across a scene of depravity that turned John's stomach. He burst through the door with Claire, a vengeful fury lending strength. They tracked the camera's cable back to its operator, pulling off the ghoulish mask to reveal nothing but a hollow-eyed automaton. Strings pulled by another. A chilling laugh carried across the warehouse as the true host stepped from the shadows to cold, mocking applause. But John was ready, hurling the pipe like a javelin. It tore through flesh with a dull, wet thud, felling the menace in a spreading pool of crimson. Sirens wailed in the distance as John met the lifeless eyes that had haunted his city. It was over, but the scars of violation remained etched on streets that could offer no shelter, even in places that once felt safest of all. Here and anywhere, no community is truly untouched from surrounding shadows.